He chose the path of perpetual torment. In his ravenous hatred, he found no peace, and with boiling blood, he scoured the umbral plains, seeking vengeance against the Dark Lords who had wronged him. And those that tasted the bite of his sword named him the Doomslayer.
Hello, I have returned. Alright, so of course, once I actually start streaming the one game I've been waiting forever to stream, nobody shows up. But that's fine. I'll just go ahead and play it anyways. Um, so yeah, this is the game that I have been waiting to stream forever. As soon as I started streaming, I knew, streaming games in general, I knew this is one of the games I wanted to tackle. And this is a game that I was, when they first announced it, I was hyped as hell for it, and even then, it still managed to outdo my expectations. I have played this game for over 300 hours in campaign alone, and I absolutely love this tech game. Um, and I wanted to stream this game because there's a lot of things I wanted to talk about. There are criticisms of the game I've heard that I don't necessarily agree with, and I want to explain why I don't agree with it. There are things in the criticisms that I have of the game, things I'm hoping they'll fix in Doom Eternal. There are things here that I just want to talk about, want to praise. There's really, I don't really want to babble my whole way through this entire thing, but it's really kind of what I'm going to be doing, is effectively trying to talk about the game in as effectively an in-depth manner as I possibly can. And I'm actually going to do that starting off with the difficulty settings, because the way the difficulty settings is handled is actually somewhat interesting in and of itself. So basically, what the difficulty settings actually impact is that the enemy AI is built in such a way that only a certain amount of enemies are allowed to attack you at once. The way this is handled is that there's effectively a token system where an enemy type can basically ask for permission to attack you, and if they are given permission, they will be given a token with which they are allowed to attack the player. Once they attack the player, that token will be used up, and it will go back into cycle, and then another enemy type will take that. Now, there's effectively a limited amount of tokens depending on what difficulty you select. So on the easier difficulty, there's going to be less tokens available at one time, meaning less enemy types are going to be able to attack you at one time. Whereas on the harder difficulty settings, there's more tokens which can be used by enemies in order for them to allow them to attack you. On, let's see, another thing to bring up with the system actually though, is that if another enemy is in a better position to attack you than say the enemy that originally took the token to attack you with is, then it will be allowed to steal that token from that other enemy type and attack you instead. So for the purposes of this playthrough tonight, I would typically go with Nightmare, but I'm going to be playing on Ultraviolence, and the reason for that is because I am going to be talking so much, and with me talking as much as I am going to be talking, I don't want my focus to constantly be being ripped away from actually trying to say what I am, and I'm constantly sitting there dying and I'm not making any progress. I want to be able to push through the game as much as I can and be able to talk as easily as I possibly can. So whilst I would absolutely usually play on Nightmare because I think Ultraviolence is kind of a joke, I know that my focus is going to be split between two things, and I can't put my full effort and focus into playing this on Nightmare as much as I would love to, because whilst I do think it is a reasonable challenge, I don't think it's terribly difficult. It does require my full attention to play. And so for that purpose, I'm going to be picking Nightmare. Just so that I don't just because, like I said, I'm going to be having my attention split between the two different aspects. So you walk eternally through the Shadow Realm, standing against evil where all others falter. May your thirst for retribution never quench, and may the blood on your sword never dry, and may we never need you again.
They are rage, brutal, without mercy. But you will be worse. Rip and tear, until it is done.
Boom. And just like that, we're right into it. So one of the really interesting things, and you can kind of see it on the hands, but somebody posted on Reddit, and you can actually see on the Doomslayer's hands, he's got pentagrams burned into his skin, which is just a fun detail I thought was really interesting. Two things I want to point out really quick, because this was actually not something I noticed as I've been playing. This is only something I really recently noticed, is this little thing right here saying area lockdown initiated. I mean, like, it's just a tiny detail, but, like, right into this opening sequence, I love all the little attentions to detail that kind of fill this game. It's just, it comes off, like, when I'm pointing it out, it seems really kind of just like, who cares? Like, that's a very obvious thing. But one of the big things that kind of happens with this game is you blow through it so quickly that it's really hard to kind of absorb the atmosphere because of how quickly you're blowing through it. And it's a real shame because there's so much effort and detail poured into everything. And I'm not sure how they could go about making this more pronounced. But, like, it is kind of just nice to be able to slow down every once in a while and just absorb what's going on in the environment of this game. Because of just how much effort and love they put into, like, every corner of this game and its world and its atmosphere. It is really nice. But then, secondly, starting off with this intro level, I love how they introduced the story here.
We have to contain this.
It's really nice because they build it up in such a way that raises so many questions. And they're questions that they don't all directly answer, which I like. They don't. There is a degree to where certain elements of this are very prominently pushed in your face, but it's very quick, to the point. It raises so many questions, it makes you want to learn more, and it just does such a great job of just pulling you in, whilst also at the same time maintaining this sense of self-aware goofiness.
Cannot determine the cause of the demonic invasion until the Rezop satellite is brought back online.
Oh yeah, by the way, I got a friend's dog in here, so if you hear this thing making noise, don't be shocked.
Welcome. I'm Dr. Samuel Hayden. I'm the head of this facility. I think we can work together and resolve this problem in a way that benefits us both.
Oh yeah, I should probably change some of the settings I have. Gonna turn off tutorials right off the bat. Compass, interaction prompt, objective notification. Complete notifications, combat rating. Yeah, there are just a few things I'd like to turn off because this game does have like a compass that displays at the top of your HUD, which I'm not a big fan of. and what I also want to start off by saying, this entire opening sequence with this, I wouldn't really call it a level because the game doesn't really qualify it as a level. It really is just an intro sequence, but it does such a great job of setting the tone, setting kind of the beats that the game will be hitting. It really does a great job of just introducing a lot of the major hitting elements that you'll be experiencing throughout this game without beating you over the head with narrative, without shoving tons of tutorials in your face, without treating you like an idiot. It does a great job of getting straight to the point without... Oh, hello. It does a great job of introducing these elements without overwhelming you with them. And I also love this opening sequence also really have a difficult job of basically taking an entire generation of gamers that weren't used to the same level of speed and strafing a lot of old school games had, were instead used to, you know, a lot of the slower paced first person shooters and stuff. And it had basically the duty to introduce you to this much faster style of gameplay, and doing so in a way that, whilst not, let's say, insulting to the people who were used to it, didn't ask an incredible amount of, how do I put this? It didn't require you to effectively push yourself to the point where
He cannot be allowed to leave this place. He would ruin everything.
for those who weren't used to this style of game, it's just a very, very light and easy way to introduce them to these elements without beating them over the head with them.
I'm willing to take full responsibility for the horrible events of the last 24 hours, but you must understand. Our interest in their world was purely for the betterment of mankind. Everything has clearly gotten out of hand now, yes. But it was worth the risk, I assure you.
And this just... I mean, if this doesn't put a smile on your face, I don't know what will. Just such a wonderful way to handle the title card. Yeah. Now another thing too is as you progress through the game, you'll be getting these little intros that will, not intros, little text briefs that will basically kind of tell you about the world and what's going on in the environment and stuff like that. And it's a nice way for them to really kind of flesh out the world and story with, and doing so really in a way that I really like. They handle it in such a manner that it's like all these things are interwoven in the game and you can see them, but they're not. But the details about them, how this came to be, this isn't stuff that's forced on you. You don't have to know any of this. But so like this stuff is here really to just give you more context for the things that you're really already seeing, and it's just a really wonderful way to introduce these elements, to tell a story without being so heavy-handed with it, really. And it's like, and the great thing is, like, it feels like the things you're seeing in game really validate a lot of the things that are being said in those data logs. It's like, of course this would be that way. Like, it really does feel like a really fleshed out, well realized history of kind of the environment and the things you're seeing around you. In context to the enemies, it's great because it makes these enemies that, let's face it, are absolutely ridiculous and just makes them feel so plausible. Narratively speaking, they're probably like one of my favorite inclusions. Yeah, but this game overall just handles its narrative so much better than Doom 3 does. There are a few moments there are a few narrative moments, and I'll bring them up when we get to them, that I don't think work as well because they feel a little. There's one moment that feels a bit contrived, and another moment that I think is padded out to a degree that it really doesn't need to be, because the characters themselves spend so much time talking. Well, not talking. There's like such large gaps in between their sentences that really feel like they don't need to be there. And really, that entire sequence doesn't even need to stop you in your tracks at all, so it feels like even more forced. There's so much stuff. It's really hard for me to stop and talk about something. I'll just have to bring them up later on because there's so much to talk about. It's really hard to stop and talk about each individual element as it comes up because there's so much stuff that is constantly being thrown at you without overwhelming you. But with the level of depth and stuff that there is to talk about in this game, it's kind of hard for me to get to it all as it comes up. Like the little doll I just picked up there, such a satisfying collectible. It's something that has a ton of personality and even reveals a bit of character about the Doomslayer as we get into the second level. Oh hey! It's telling me that literally nobody's in chat, but you're here, so awesome. I haven't just recently started playing this again. I have never stopped playing this game. I said this at the beginning of the stream. I have over 300 hours in this game's campaign. That's not an exaggeration. I wanna see something quick, because it's not okay. Yeah, it is okay. There we go. I was just changing windows for myself. Oops. Did that? What is my stream thing doing? Okay. All right. Good to go. Or not. Hold on. Everything's blowing up. All right. I can believe that this one is super with. Yeah. Alright. Yeah, this is a game I have been just dying to stream. I started streaming a while ago. Ever since I started streaming, this is the big game I've been waiting to actually be able to stream for everyone. Of course, nobody shows up the night that I do it, but I've been kind of dying to play this just purely on the basis of the fact that I have so much I want to say about it, both in regards to criticisms I've heard about the game, in regards to just so much I want to talk about, really. There's a lot of stuff with some of the upgrade systems I want to talk about. Hello. The general design of the game I want to talk about. Because a big thing actually, I want to talk about is this game is fast-paced, but it's fast-paced in a very different way than the original games were. Because in the original games, they were very fast-paced in the sense that your movement speed is very fast, and that combined with the fact that you could blow through levels very quickly, even despite the fact that the enemies weren't very quick, and they really didn't do much in the way of encouraging you to move if you were in pretty open spaces, because their projectiles were very slow and you could very easily sidestep them. Because of how fast you were often blowing through the game, it was very, very... it was almost kind of like a speed-running style of nature, I guess you could say. It's kind of hard for me to... I should have gone for the trigger shot. I don't know what I'm doing. Yeah, but anyways, it's not a game where you're fighting very aggressive enemies. It's not a game where things are constantly being thrown at you and you have to react to it. It's more so a game that very much I kind of was trying to avoid just charging in because I'm in the middle of trying to formulate the words. Like, I think a great example of this is playing Doom, the original Doom, with the walking on by default. Because the game feels like a completely different experience than it does when you have auto running. It feels like a much slower, a much more drawn-out experience. It's still a game that very actively requires you to move, but here, the way the pacing is built in such a way to make it fast is that the game is constantly throwing stuff at you and constantly asking you to react to it. The enemies here are much more aggressive, they push you a lot harder, and they require a lot more from you, so despite the fact that your movement is much slower, you're forced to do a lot more with your movement, I think is the best way to put it. And on top of that, the game is constantly asking you and pushing you to be aggressive through the glory kill system, through basically trying to manage your various resources. The game is constantly pushing you to get as close and as personal as possible. In the original Doom, you really didn't have to. It was certainly something the game enabled you to do, but it was really just as effective a strategy in certain situations. Excuse me, gas cannon and blow things. Yeah. In the original Doom, you could certainly play that way, but more often than not, it was also just as effective a strategy to kind of hang back in certain situations. You could kind of like stick by a wall, and you could kind of just hang out and chill, and kind of just pop around the corner, shoot enemies, or you could charge in, which of course I more often than not did, because you know that it's more fun to play that way, but you weren't really ever required to. Whereas in this game, standing still and trying to play that way, trying to peek around corners, and it just really, how do I put it? It really encourages you to keep moving. And yes, like, exactly, like, both you and your enemies die incredibly quickly in this game. And it's handled so well in such a manner that it never is annoying. Because that's another thing with the glass cannon problem that I think is a problem with, like, games that often rely on glass cannon style gameplay, is that it can very easily get very annoying because, more often than not, you'll die in a manner that just feels really cheap. Oh, hello. Well, that didn't go as I wanted. But especially, like, and here's another thing that shocks me, like, this is a AAA game and it has projectile-only enemies. Like, you never see that in AAA games anymore. And it's such a, like, really just projectile enemies at all now I think about it. Like, it's so common that so many games will just purely rely on, yeah, like, there's so many games that rely on just, like, really bullcrap tactics to make themselves difficult. And
welcome to the UAC. Now 221 accident-free days.
And it's so strange and so satisfying to get a game with this level of quality, with this level of polish, with this level of care behind it, that has projectile-only base enemies. and like that combined with that, because even the original Doom didn't have only projectile enemies; it had hit scanning enemies. Which, granted, I don't think it was handled awful in that game, but it's still one of the weaker elements of that game. Here, though, because every element of the game is tuned in such a way to constantly make you push forward, constantly force you to be aggressive, play aggressive, not only play aggressive, but play smart. It just, it creates a different kind of fast pace, I think is the best way to put it. I always have a really difficult time, and I don't think, and even now, I don't think I very effectively explained the ways in which the original game was
Hello,
fast-paced.
I am Vega, the sentient intelligence assigned to Mars. After running diagnostics on the Praetor suit, it appears that I can activate optional challenges that, when completed, will assist in upgrading your arsenal at an accelerated pace. I have added a tracking component to your dossier.
I think I missed. Did I miss one of the secrets in the last level? I think I might have missed one of the dolls. Did I? I was talking so much, I don't know. Yeah. And actually, I want to talk about this a second, because they stopped patching this game a while ago, and there's like there's two bugs in this that really irks me. So there's one bug in the Argent Tower level where there's supposed to be an action track that plays, and it doesn't always play. That's the first bug that irks me. Actually, the second bug that irks me, but this is the first bug that irks me. And that is, sometimes when I go to upgrade this, it instead upgrades this, which drives me insane because I would never upgrade this period until the end of the game because I hate this. I hate this thing's inclusion. And really, just this entire upgrades menu is one of the things that really irks me about this game. It's not awful, like it doesn't ruin the game by any stretch, but it was one of the most flawed aspects of this game in general because there's so much fat here that could be easily trimmed. This is useless. All the upgrades here don't need to be here. All the upgrades here should not be here because a big part of the enjoyment of this game is the exploration. It is the finding and discovering of things. So inherently building a system into the game that lets you completely bypass that is so frustrating to me. This doesn't need to be in the game. It's not a huge problem, but it doesn't need to be in the game. Some of these things under dexterity I appreciate, but I think you could pretty much easily get away with doing a lot of this stuff by default as things of the character. This really annoys me as well because some of these upgrades I'm fine with, but the basically this decreased explosive barrel, decreases damage. I don't think it's awful. I just don't really like the way it was handled here, because specifically in this regard, basically what this upgrade actually does is it decreases the range of splash damage that barrels have an effect on you. It doesn't actually decrease the level of damage you take, it just decreases the radius by which you are affected by explosive barrels, and the default radius is monstrous. Like, thankfully, I didn't die last level, but it is so common for me to get blown up by just a stray barrel because of how massive the blast radiuses on the explosions are. By default to the player, it is insane, and it drives me nuts. Like, this should have been the default upgrade. The only thing here that I really kind of do appreciate in terms of like an upgrade mechanics thing is the immune to explosive barrel damage thing. That I'm like, yeah, that's fair. I think that's a decent upgrade. I do like the upgrades here for the most part, with the exception of the fact that some of the weapon mods in this are they're not useless. None of the weapon mods here are useless, but there are some here that are so clearly built in such a way that they are endlessly more useful than the others, and it kind of makes some of them feel pointless by comparison. So yeah. That's kind of my overall thoughts on the upgrades. Oh, and the other thing too is there's some stuff, like especially when the runes start getting involved, where this game kind of breaks a bit. Cause you can there's like an upgrade for the Gatling gun where you get like those triple barrel things, and you can endlessly shoot it without needing it to cool down because it doesn't overheat. But then there's an upgrade you can get where if you have over 100 armor, you have infinite ammo. So you can pretty much just sit there with this thing, infinitely filling your enemies with bullets, and it kind of feels, I mean, to be fair, you are kind of mobily disengaged a bit, but still. And then there's another one. What is it? Oh my god. Yeah, it really is just... There are a few upgrades here that do great things, and I think overall they could have just chosen better upgrades. Oh yeah, I remember. There's another thing I want to talk about the upgrade system, which is haven't gone that far yet, and that is the Argent upgrades. Yeah, you got the first one done. Which in general I take out. Playing the campaign without them is more interesting. Well, I do enjoy some of the upgrades. Like, there are some upgrades in this I absolutely love, and I love combining some of those upgrades that come from the rooms themselves. The thing I hate about rooms is I hate the room challenges. Well, not all of them, but some of them are just kind of really tedious and unenjoyable.
I believe in honesty.
And almost all of them come down to the
Especially
wire.
now. And what will be your final...
But, like, here's the thing, though. Like, I say I hate these things.
Older room.
These are really, like, minor gripes in the grand scheme of things. Like, okay, the upgrade system could have been handled better. I don't care. I mean, yeah, it's not great. It's not perfect, but... I mean, it's like a minor bump in the road at best. Or at worst, I mean. You know, and really that's the big thing with this game. Like, most of my complaints with this game are the kind of things I really can just shrug off. Like, I can talk about them in depth, and I can sit here and I can blabber off about all the little problems this game has to no end. Like, I absolutely hate the Hell Knight design. I have always hated the Doom 3 Hell Knight, and the fact that they reused it here pisses me off. But at the same time, it's like, it's one enemy design, and whilst I don't like its overall design, does it ruin the game? No. No, it does not. Absolutely not. It has little to no impact on my enjoyability of the game whilst I am playing it. Also, that's my favorite. That's just one of my favorite glory kills. I love all the glory kills where you can just pin an enemy to a wall and kill them that way. It is so fun. But yeah, like all of my complaints with this game, really, as I'm talking about the snow, they really don't bother me that much. There are things I can really talk in depth about because usually when it's a problem, it's a really in-depth problem. But it's not a problem that ruins the experience. It's a complicated issue that I don't think completely handicaps the experience. I think is the best way. It's just somewhat annoying as someone who's played the game for like hours on end. I guess the idea is visually separate. Well, yeah, I get that, but I hate the design still. Like, I can absolutely get behind the idea of them getting a different design for the Hell Knight, and I can also understand them perhaps wanting to reference Doom 3 a bit, because it is a game that is attached to the series, for better or for worse. It is a game that exists, and that is a part of their history, and I can absolutely understand them wanting to pay homage to it.
Demonic presence eliminated.
With that said,
Lockdown
the
disengaged.
Doom 3 Hell Knight does not look like a demon. It looks like a bland, Hulk-like character with a skull for a head that has no eyes. That is what it looks like. It looks like the Hulk with a skull that has no eyes. And that is very boring and very not demonic.
Here at the UAC, we take pride in our own workforce.
Then we get to the chainsaw, which I love.
Are you ready to move on?
But the one issue, and the one thing I'm really glad they've talked about the fact that they're amending this in Doom Eternal. Later in the game, it becomes a very useless item because you're more often than not, like with the Argent upgrades, which I will get to in a bit, it kind of becomes a bit of a useless item that you don't have to rely on at all very much. Because not only do you very rarely run out of ammo, but when you do, more often than not, you can just kind of rely on the, you can just pretty easily rely, okay, I've got to find 3 secrets, let's see how to find 3 secrets. You can very really easily rely on the pickups that are in the level. Which is something they've talked about they're amending in Doom Eternal, which makes me so happy. Because here, as much as I love the idea of the Jameson, I think it's absolutely genius the way that they've tried to handle the resource juggling. Because that's another big thing. In the original Doom, resource juggling was a big part of the game. You know, constantly needing to consider what weapons to use and where to use them and what enemies to use them on and how you want to go about using them. Based on how much ammo you have for them, the level of damage they do, the different roles they play in combat, all these different things led to the combat being so much more in depth than it would have been at its surface level. So much more ends up having to be considered because of your limited resources. But the thing was, with the original Doom, is that resource management aspect of the game would more often than not pull you away from combat. Because in order to get more ammo and more health and more things of that nature, you always had to go leave combat and try and find some. Or just rely on whatever resources they had left for you in the arena. Here, the process of juggling your resources is literally baked into the combat itself. And that is such an ingenious way to incorporate old elements to incorporate the idea and the methodology behind that element, while simultaneously, I don't necessarily know I'd say improving it. But, how do I put this? But baking it more into the core identity of what the game is trying to be. This game is trying to be a very fast-paced game, constantly asking you to step away from the combat in order to be able to juggle your resources. Then the game would inherently lose its speed very quickly. You would lose a lot of momentum. And so to literally design the resource management aspect of this game to actually push the combat forward and use that as a way to make the game fast-paced, this is very ingenious. I should also probably mention, as I mentioned this at the beginning of the stream, but I don't think you were here at the stream. I am playing on Ultraviolence. I don't usually play on Nightmare because I think Ultraviolence is way too easy. But because I'm talking so much, and I knew I was going to be talking so much, because like I said, I just have like tons of stuff I want to say about this game. Because I am talking so much, it's very difficult for me to focus. And whenever I am playing on Nightmare, I need to be able to focus. So as much as I would typically prefer to play on Nightmare, because I do think, for me, it is kind of this game's medium skill. Where to the point where it's challenging, but it's not like horrifically challenging. It doesn't beat me over the head. As much as I typically would, I know if I'm not putting like 100% of my focus on this game, I would be dying left and right. No, I don't want to get that yet. I want to come back to here and save it because I'm going to get a weapon mod for a different weapon. I prefer, I can't play, like, when I'm playing this alone, I really
Welcome
can't
to the
stand
UAC's
playing this
Mars
game
installation.
on
Located
ultra
in the
violence,
vast
just
California
because
Gas Basin.
it's
This
too
high-tech
easy.
mining and research facility
Like,
is pushing the boundaries
it's
of
just
humanity.
such a joke. I mean, don't get me wrong, like, it was in the original Doom 2. Like, that is not a criticism. I could easily just level this game and say, hey, this game's difficulty, on hard difficulty, is a joke. No, like, I actually get it. The original Doom, I will actually argue, is much easier than this game. I can play through the original Doom on Ultra Violence and not die once. I have done that before. And I actually almost did it on stream, except for the fact that I killed myself with a rocket launcher because I was drowning in rocket ammo and started spamming the thing with reckless abandon. And, like an idiot, of course, I ended up dying as a result of that. Imps don't really one-shot you. They have to two-shot you, but still. It's not something I would consider hard, but like I said, it requires all of my focus and all of my attention, and I really can't, when I'm trying to say words, be able to focus on those two different elements at once. Because with how hard I do have to push myself in some of those combat encounters, it really does require my full attention. Like I said. But yeah, another thing actually about, and you might want to later go back and see, stun mod is great for shield guys, but outside of that, I don't really like it. The stun mod is the first thing I'll get though, because the shield guys are coming up, and whilst I do think the shield guys are pretty easy, it is nice to have a method it's nice to have a method to very easily be able to apprehend them and just make them not a problem at all. But usually, I would never use this mod outside of that. Outside of the shield guys, I never use this mod, because I feel like it makes the game way too easy if I'm just constantly stunning enemies left and right, and it's not very satisfying for me to kill an enemy who's not even attacking me. Like, if I have to glory kill them, that's one thing. But, like, when I'm shooting them, when I am consciously shooting them, and they have no way, and they technically should be able to attack because they have life left, but they don't attack, it doesn't feel right to me. It doesn't feel as satisfying or fun. So I only use them to disable the shield guys.
All UAC employees
Also,
are subject to
can we all just say
regulations
this is
to ensure
one
their
of the best
production
assault rifles
capabilities
ever
are
put through a
not
video
degraded.
game? Like, assault rifles are pretty meh most of the time, but this thing is just, it's a beefer. But yeah, anyways, as I was saying, at the beginning of the stream, I actually talked about how they handled some of the different elements of the game's difficulty, because there is more to this game's difficulty than just more to this game's handling of its difficulty settings than just, hey, the enemies do more damage. And actually, I won't make it easy. I'll explain it again, because why not? Basically, there is a limited set of tokens that are available to every enemy in this game. Also, aside from the super shotgun, this is my favorite enemy game. I love it. It kind of makes me sad that it's not returning Doom Eternal. Not to say that I'm not absolutely appreciative of the fact that they are including the old school plasma gun, because I do love the old school plasma gun. But I do kind of wish I had the option to swap between both, if I'm being honest, because I do love this game's plasma gun so much. But yeah, as I was saying, there's a limited set of tokens that enemies are able to access effectively that allows them to attack the player. So basically, what a demon will do is it will ask for permission to attack the player. And if it receives permission, it will receive a token. Now, on the harder difficulties, there are more tokens available to enemy types at one time. Oh yeah, the Gauss Cannon's great too. I mean, I love all the guns in this game, don't get me wrong. But it's just the plasma gun just... Yeah, so there's a limited set of tokens available to all the demons at any time. On harder difficulties, more tokens will be available to the demons, and so therefore more demons will be allowed to attack you at once. But the big caveat in this is that so basically when they ask permission to attack you, they won't instantaneously attack you. It's just they're asking for permission to do so. So there's a bit of a wind-up to it. But also, in that time of wind-up, if an enemy is in a more strategically advantageous place to attack you than another enemy, but there are no tokens available, then the game will effectively look for the enemy that is in the least advantageous position to be able to attack you, and that demon that is in a more advantageous position is able to steal its token and attack you instead. And on the harder difficulties, there are more tokens available than
Unlocking
demons.
your
So,
access to
on
the
the easier
facility
difficulties,
scanner.
not as many
Come to the
demons are
Vega
allowed to
terminal,
wail
and
on
I'll
you
give
at
you
once,
what you
on top of
need.
doing less damage. Whereas on the harder difficulties, more demons are allowed to attack you at once, and they do more damage. Meaning that on the harder difficulties, you'll notice in some encounters that the enemy types are far more aggressive. I thought there was another guy supposed to come up here unless I killed him too. Oh wait, no, he's over there. Yeah, but it's honestly gotten to the point where, like, if I am just playing for fun, standard, I do think Nightmare, as much as I love it, I do think it can be a little too easy at times. Because what ends up happening on Nightmare is, and actually this happens in all the other difficulties, but it's a lot more noticeable on Nightmare, is if you know where all the upgrades are in this game, and you play 100% like I usually do, then the game actually ends up getting easier as you progress. So what ends up happening is on the harder difficulties, in general, the areas that open up this game tend to be harder than some of the later areas, basically. And we're about to come up on the Argent upgrades, so I will have a chance to talk about that stuff too. Hello. Well, the Gauss Cannon is also a really great tool to disable the shield guys, because you can just easily blow through their shields. But I love the idea in reverse difficulty curve is the biggest issue. Unironically, the first level is the hardest part of the whole game. Yeah, I mean, kind of the biggest issue with using upgrades in the game in general is that you run the risk of potentially throwing off a game's balance, because you have to consider so many different variable elements of whether a player will find this or find that, or whether they'll access this, what they'll upgrade, things like this. Yeah. There's just so much to consider with the balancing of something like this. And you can either try and middle road it, where the game will end up being easier. Well, no, not easier. Where the game will end up, basically, you kind of think, okay, the player's probably going to get, like, first-time players are probably going to get, like, say, 50% of the upgrades or something like that, right? Or maybe 75% or whatever percent that's not, like they find an average amount of secrets and they progress through the game in a relatively normal manner. They don't 100% it or anything. You balance it from that standpoint to the point where where the game will be, like, let's say, a standard level of difficulty throughout the entire campaign. It never really gets too much harder. It never really gets too much easier. It's kind of just one standard level. The harder difficulties, then what ends up happening, well, not the harder difficulties, when a player ends up finding more and more upgrades, because they are moving upward in terms of their constant scaling of their power and their strength, the more easy the game is going to go if they effectively know where all this stuff is. Conversely, the game is going to get much harder if they don't get any upgrades. And the problem is that you've got people who aren't always going to want to go for all the upgrades. I played this game with like what I basically call minimal upgrade runs. And in doing so, no, never mind. In doing so, my brain just went. In doing so, I have found that the game's difficulty feels much more balanced, oddly enough, in a way that the game's consistently getting harder when I do my minimal upgrade runs. Basically, there are a few upgrades in this game I consider bare minimum essentials that you must upgrade, period, no matter whether you're doing like a standard run or if you're doing, like I said, like a minimal upgrade run. And we're actually going to get up right to one of these things right now. And I'll actually talk about my minimal upgrade runs in a second here.
Take it. It will give you strength, help you on your journey, if you can withstand the power surge.
So, Argent upgrades. This system is probably, single-handedly, my biggest problem with this game. Probably. There's so many things I say that about. Like, honestly, like, that phrase has come to mean nothing to me because I've said that about so many different things. But this system poses a great number of problems in a number of ways. For starters, you start out with 50 armor, which I have no idea why they set that as the base cap, especially considering you start out with 100 health. What the heck? Like, they have the same amount of upgrades, so what's the point of doing that? But secondly, with that, with the inherent flaw with the health and armor sides of the systems is that it basically completely invalidates the point of having like the mega health pickups. Because it's like, what's the point of having those pickups where I can completely boost my stats to a point that is basically outrageous if I can easily reach those points just by playing standard combat encounters? Conversely, the problem with the ammo upgrades in this is that it completely invalidates, in the late game, the usefulness of the chainsaw. You do well have to upgrade this at least once or twice in my minimal upgrade runs, because by the end of the game, you need that ammo because of how much more the game's throwing at you, and it's throwing more chunky enemies at you, let's say. But it is effectively just... but when you fully upgrade it, it really just handicaps the usefulness of the chainsaw completely. Because you end up, like I said, you're drowning in so much ammo already. It's like, what is the point of having a tool that, what is the point of having a tool that effectively is able to feed you resources in abundance when you already have so much abundance as is? Sorry, hold on. I gotta do something quick. I'm not leaving. I just gotta do a thing. Alright, I'm back. Yeah, and that is one thing I'm really happy they've even talked about that. They've talked about that with Doom Eternal. They've really refined that in Doom Eternal from what I've heard, to the point where you are relying on the chainsaw to pull you through the game, which to me just makes me so much more happy. I'm going to start with armor. I always start with armor, because for me it's like having a cap of 50 armor is just retarded. I don't know why they did that. So yeah.
That is pure Argent energy you've just taken into your system.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to agree with you. I will unlock the remaining Argent cells within the facility for you. Vega, give him what he wants.
61,337 UAC members deceased. 81% of the facility is on lockdown. Demonic presence through the Mars installation is critical. According to the records, Dr. Hayden, the invasion originated in the Lazarus facility. It seems that a hell wave was activated, transforming 64% of all UAC employees into the creatures you see roaming throughout the facility. The rest were killed by the demons released from their holding cells by Olivia Pierce.
I feel I should apologize for what's happened here. Some of my employees took things too far. Olivia was the cause of all this, and I believe you will have to deal with her in time. You may not agree with our research, but know this. We exploited hell and its resources because it was in mankind's best interest to do so. What you now see in this facility is the cost of progress. But none of that matters now.
There is an emergency in the foundry. The regulators have been destroyed and the core temperatures are now destabilizing.
They've overrun the adjacent facility. If the venting turbines aren't re-engaged, neither of us will survive the meltdown.
Now, I don't mean to insult this game's narrative, because I love it. And honestly, this sequence in and of itself does not bother me whatsoever. But there is a slight degree to where I can kind of see something coming up in a lot of the ways they handle these story sequences. It becomes very apparent to me as a result of knowing some of what's happened behind the scenes. They said the story was introduced in the game very, very late in development. And what the kind of registers is here is this was probably not a room that had a lot of meaning in the original version of the game, if it was even in the game originally. They said, like, Hugo said literally, like, he couldn't tell us how much time was left before they added the story because it would make them sound irresponsible. And I'm kind of thinking, I'm wondering if the reason why some of these sequences play out where, like, you're locked in a room or something like that is almost purely because of how little time they had and how much they didn't really plan that far ahead for that. Because I'm kind of thinking they probably only had a few months. Like, with how he was talking, it sounded like they might have only had a few months left with the incorporation of the story elements at best. Which, like I said, I don't think that sequence is poorly handled. If anything, like, I would much rather have them handle it like that than, like, having a cutscene or something like that going on. But there are a few sequences where I do definitely feel that it could, like, a bit more effort should have been thrown into them, and I will get into those sequences in a second. Actually, no, I won't. Actually, so one of them comes up here at the end of this level, now I think about it. So I just kind of multitasking right now because something came up and stuff. Alright, so let's hop into this. This is a great...
After running more diagnostics on the active Praetor suit, it appears that I can accelerate the upgrading of your arsenal by measuring your combat effectiveness.
I don't know why.
I have added a tracker to your helmet's display.
But something about this door visually is very...
The facility will not allow you access to the turbine room unless the demonic threat level is brought down inside the foundry. Our security systems cannot be overridden.
There's something that's so visually satisfying about this door, and I can't explain it. One of the things we gotta do is we gotta kill 3 possessed Let's better. Let's do that. Let's up it one arrow. And that is honestly very hard to do. It's the perfect combo. Yeah, I don't know. Something just, like, graphically speaking, something about that door is very appealing to me. I can't quite put my finger on it. I will go for micro missiles. The scope is useless for anything but lost souls. Honestly, this was something they showed off in the YouTube demo, and I kind of wish they had utilized this more, where there were like these little openings you could walk up to and hit, and like you see these things going around with like pre-recorded sessions, and you can get more lore that way. Yeah, I mean, like, you don't have to. I'm just saying, like, that's the only thing it's useful for. It is like the one weapon mod, I will say, with absolutely no doubt in my mind, is completely pointless. The one thing that I think is kind of saving it in Eternal is it looks like it has like a piercing shot that does a ton more damage. Here, though, it is absolutely pointless. And if anything, it's actually more of a hindrance than a help. Because given how much you have to move in this game, like, oof. Like having tunnel vision combined with the fact that your mobility is not decreased, but like, let's face it, if you're trying to be precise, you're probably not moving very
much. Access granted. Gas leak stopped.
Also, Hellraisers, which are introduced in this sequence. Fantastic design enemy. I absolutely love the visual design of that enemy type. It's such an awesome looking enemy type. Poses no threat whatsoever. This thing is a joke. I don't know who designed the AI of this thing, but my god. Like, I'm just gonna, here, no, you know what? Let's not even attack this thing. Let's just let him do his business. Your peripheral vision gets shot entirely, which means that, yeah. Also, I love this song. This song in particular really reminds me of Dax's soundtrack for some reason. I mean, an imp would have hit me at least a few times now. Like, come on.
Demonic threat
That man is
reduced
such
by
a joke.
25%.
I love the visual design of him. But by God, I don't think I have ever been killed by one. Oh wait, I forgot that secret. Yeah. They really don't pose any threat whatsoever, which is really annoying. Especially because they took the standard shotgun zombie, not the standard shotgun zombie, they took the standard, actually, yeah, I'll take the standard shotgun zombie in that because they have the freaking shields. They took the standard zombie types from Doom 1 and 2, and they beefed them up drastically. Like, those things were jokers in the original game, with the exception of the only threat they posed was the fact that they were hit-scanning enemy types. Otherwise, they would have been an absolute joke if they were hit-scanning projectile-based enemies. Weird? Ooh. These guys on Nightmare. I think I've died to these things more on Nightmare than I have any other enemy type, if I'm being honest. Like, that charge thing they do just... Oof, it messes me up. They also have the most boring, well, I say the most boring, I think the Manculus has the most boring glory kill. But they have most of the boring glory kills. The Hell Knights do.
Warning, core temperature rising.
Ooh, I forgot a secret back there, damn it. Eee. I completely forgot about this. I was going to talk about this. This is one of the things I point to whenever I'm talking about this game as a reboot, because one of the things I always bring up about this game as a reboot is that what it does is it does not take the original ideas and it does not just redo them. What it does, and it also doesn't completely ignore them, what it does is it takes those ideas on a fundamental basic level and it says, what does this idea mean today? You know, what does resource management mean for Doom today? What does fast-paced mean for Doom today? What do all these different elements mean in a modern sense, right? It takes all these different aspects and it asks, how can we recreate this in a way that is both faithful to the ideas and concepts that were in the original game, but is also different from how these elements were handled in the original game? And this level is a fantastic summation of that concept. This level is non-linear. Just like the levels in the original Doom were, well, they were linear, but they were structured in such a manner. I haven't been upgrading this entire time. I am a friggin' idiot. They're not non-linear. They are linear in the sense that there's a start and an end and a path you have to take to get through them. But they are non-linear in the sense that you're never really forced down one tunnel-long path. Like the levels, there's always more to the levels than just running down one straight path. You can diverge and take different routes and stuff like that. But this level is very different from the way that the original Doom's levels were structured, because it is actually a properly non-linear level. A lot of the original Doom's levels were non-linear in the sense that as you were playing through them, you were never forced to take one path, but if you were trying to progress through the level, there was really one path to take. So, like, you would always have to get the red key card before you could access the red doors, and you were never allowed to get to the areas that had the red door, past the red doors, if you didn't have a red key card. So there was like always a kind of beaten path you needed to follow to get to that point, right? Here, though, some of the levels in this game that are properly non-linear are non-linear from the standpoint of the fact that they give you different objectives to complete in this big open space, but they never tell you what order you have to do them in. So technically speaking, they've taken something from the original Doom and they've managed to re-invoke those ideas but doing it in a manner that's just a little different. I completely whiffed that. Also, I forgot to upgrade because I'm an idiot. Hey, look, that bug I mentioned earlier happened. Fantastic! Oops. I'll just hold off right now, and I will go for your room. Beautiful. But I didn't mention this earlier with like the way they reincorporated resource management into this game, the ways in which this game is fast-paced is different from the original game. You know, like all this stuff it's in the original Doom. It's just handled differently here in a way that's like just realized in a different manner. You can tell that they had been paying a lot between Doom 3. More painkiller in Doom. I mean, I guess I don't really like that comparison. And I will tell you why in a second. Painkiller and Serious Sam, by extension, were A, very linear games, and B, they were pretty much just their combat sections, where they would lock you in an arena and ask you to take on one of the enemies. And really, at the end of the day, that's pretty much all those games were. There wasn't really a whole lot of exploration, and when there was, it wasn't very pronounced as an element the game was asking you to participate in, I think is the best way to put it. It's not... There was exploration in those games, there were secrets, but it was kind of just like... It felt like it was doing it out of obligation, and it didn't feel like it was an integral core element of the game. I have not played that. Yeah. Whereas here, they've kind of incorporated, I mean, like, I'd honestly argue, the original Doom did that thing where it would lock you in a room and ask you to deal with a bunch of monsters as well. I guess maybe because of AI limitations or something like that, it wasn't handled in a manner that was not as complex, where like they were able to like say, hey, you have to kill a certain amount of monsters, and specifically the monsters in this room before you're allowed to progress. What it would do is it would like they'd be set to a timer or something like that. Specifically, I can't remember what the level is called, but there's this big level where it's like there's a switch against a wall in a big room. You walk toward the switch, and once you pass a certain barrier, 3 walls will open, and you'll basically be fighting hordes of monkeys. There's a few segments that are kind of like that in the original Doom. So it's not like that's a completely foreign concept to Doom. It's just it's relied on much more heavily in this game than it is in the original title. But that said, though, I don't think it's a problem because it feels like it's inherently built into the core concept, and I think the best way to put it is it doesn't feel like it's forced in. It just feels like a very natural inclusion into the game, and like a very nice way to have the combat sections feel much more structured, feel much more intelligently laid out.
Core temperature rising.
There's also a secret back here. Yeah, another thing I actually mentioned I wanted to talk about some of the criticisms I've heard about this game that I do not personally agree with. That is... Okay, it's just zapping things. One of the things I've heard about this game is that it gets very repetitive, which I could not disagree with more. This game... What this game does is it introduces a set of basic mechanics that it constantly builds upon throughout the course of its experience. Yeah. The game regularly, through the upgrade systems and through the various mechanics that the game has, it's constantly giving you new things to play with and making the things you have
Demonic
already
threat reduced by
powerful.
50%.
And introducing new enemy types, new environments, new things for you to explore and discover, and different layouts for you to go about, and the combat arenas are structured in different manners. I fail to see how this game is honestly repetitive, because it's just taking really in-depth elements that it has, and it's constantly finding ways to make them more fresh, constantly finding a manner in which to make these elements more engaging, constantly scaling things up a bit.
UAC accidental death in this member deployment. See Jessica in Human Resources.
I really don't understand the criticism of this game. I can certainly appreciate that until they're trying to amend that criticism. It's never a criticism, like I said, that I agree with, but I can certainly appreciate their desire to try and add more variety to a game that I already thought had enough
Demonic
variety.
threat reduced by 75%.
And I certainly don't hate Zero Highlight here sometimes. Yep, there he is. So there are a few. Oh, there's probably going to be another Hell Knight down there in that combat space down there as well. But sometimes, depending on what routes you take, Hell Knights will spawn in different locations. Like there's probably another one over here in this room, I think. Yep, there he is. Hello. Eeh. My cursor is doing funny things to my window over here. Can I not? Can you just not? Please? I don't really know if it needs more variety, but one thing I enjoy doing. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I thought it had enough variety as was. It wasn't very repetitive. But apparently that was a criticism a lot of people had with the game. And I can certainly appreciate their desire to try and amend that. And I mean, hey, if it results in more variety, if it results in more things to do, then you know what? I'm all for it. And from the things I've seen, I really do appreciate some of the different elements that they have added. A lot of what they did with like the platforming and the scaling of the environment looks really fun. I can't wait for that. So I like the idea of them introducing some various puzzle elements into the environments outside of just something like keycards. I don't think it was strictly necessary, but I can certainly appreciate their desire to try and push those elements further. And to try and give people more reason to play outside of just combat. But that's another thing, actually. This is going to drive me nuts. What's basically happening is that my friggin' mouse cursor is somehow managing to drift out of the game into the... Well, it's not drifting out of the game, but my second monitor is picking up the movements of my mouse scrolling, and it's scrolling the page so that it's completely screwing up my ability to see who's commenting and who's saying what. Anyways, but all the different elements in this game really do feed into each other very nicely. I have to get back there killing these guys. No, that's not what I wanted. Ah. All the elements in this game feed into each other very nicely. Because through the exploration, you get more more upgrades, which feeds into the combat. In the combat, you get points. You get more points, which feed into the upgrade system. And into the exploration system. All the systems act as a really nice break from one another, so that no one of the systems ever gets too repetitive. The combat never gets too repetitive because you always have the exploration.
Demonic presence reduced to minimum safe levels. Lockdown disengaged. Turbine
The
room doors
exploration
now
never gets too
open.
repetitive or boring because you always have those other elements. Like it's just a really nice way to incorporate all these different elements to prevent any one of them from getting too irritating. Which again, yet another reason why I disagree that this game is too repetitive. It is beautifully and wonderfully paced. And in my opinion, it never runs out of steam.
Warning. Core temperature reaching critical levels.
But again, I don't hate that that's something they're trying to amend with people's perspectives. And the fact that it's encouraged them and pushed them to make the game even more everything than it was before, I think is a great thing. You know, I would hate for them to not receive criticisms and as a result we're getting an experience that is very much just the same. I don't think we would be praising and talking about this game as much as we do if it was just Doom 1 again. You know, they tried to do more with the ideas. They tried to push things further. They tried to reinterpret some of the ideas. They tried to do more with everything they incorporate. Hold on, you said some, I don't know, the whole repetitive claim sounds like comments from those who praise in the Colossus, yet advise playing them. Yeah. It was a very common criticism, and it was one thing that really ticked me off, because I was just like, no. The Incredibles 2. I disagree strongly. Not that it's a great movie or anything, but... Hey. Also, I've got a dog barking in the background, so that's nice. It was a very common
stabilized.
It was very common. I was like looking at my comment screen for a second there. Because I constantly am like, looking back and forth between the game and the comments.
It could be Olivia.
Which is yet another reason why I didn't play this on Nightmare. It's a very common criticism, one I completely disagree with, and I just needed to talk about it.
Authorization. Olivia Pierce. Alpha 402.
This is a sequence I mentioned. Actually, oh, this sequence broke again. This always happens. Well, not always, but sometimes it happens. Well, most of the time, actually, it happens. But for some reason, the sequence never plays out.
Argent energy tower.
She is trying to tear open the portal between our world and theirs.
Oh boy. There's supposed to be something that's happening on screen right now where she's playing with a bunch of different holographic elements, but for some reason, I don't know if it's just my version of the game or whatever, it's constantly breaking and never playing out.
Could not have saved them anyway.
But the problem with this sequence I have is we have this moment where our character isn't doing anything, right? Like, the main villain has effectively kind of screwed us over now. Really. Like, when you get down here, the main villain has effectively screwed us over. And our main character
The system won't allow anyone but Olivia
nothing
to override it
about
now.
it.
We will have to shut down the Argent Tower manually from the surface.
And the thing is, it's something that could have been amended so easily that it frustrates me. Because, like, they could have made it like that other sequence in the prior level where you had control of your character, so you yourself could, like, try and break into the room or something, you know? Like, you'd be able to, like, basically, like, vocalize your character's frustration through your action and trying to go, like, or something like that. But no, like, they don't give you control. They force you to just sit there and do nothing. Or comparatively, they could have, like, animated it so, like, your character was sitting there trying to break into the room or something. Like, it's not that he has to succeed. I didn't think that. I didn't get that. I don't need it to... I try to 100% this all the time, and because I'm talking so much, I forget various things. It's not that. It's required... No. It's not that it's required for you to break in and stop her. It's that, at the very least, the main character should try, because at the core of what they've built this character's identity to be, him just sitting there and doing nothing feels wrong. It feels very, very wrong. And like, it's not, like I said, like a lot of things I've said, it's not a big issue. It doesn't completely ruin anything. I can kind of understand why. Because, you know, from a standpoint of, like, interactivity and stuff like that, it does make it feel more like a cutscene. Which is not something that people particularly like in a Doom game. And I'm sure it also kind of comes back to they were a bit rushed when they were introducing these story elements. But it is still immensely frustrating for me because they built this character up as a character of pure action, as a character who speaks by what he does. So when he just stands there and does nothing but kind of gawk at her, do nothing, just sit there and stare at her, it feels very out of character.
Olivia is using the tower to drill a doorway into their world. You can prevent her from opening the gate by disabling the tower induction filters.
I am absolutely aware of this.
Untethered cross-dimensional activity is a frequent occurrence outside of the base, so it is recommended that workers buddy up when journeying onto the Martian surface.
Imps, let me get my dexterity. Hallelujah. Alright. Well, it's a very short sequence, and I can kind of just chalk it up to, you know, meh. Like, either way, she would have gotten away with it. Whether my character intervened or not, we all know she would have gotten away with it because in order for the game story to progress, that's just what would have happened. I just think that perhaps the character's personality could have been better articulated in that moment. That through very simple means, they could have very easily done some more characterization with who I am. Hello. Let's see. Yeah, it's nice. Oh boy! Here we go. The beginning of the rumination. I don't like Rune Trials, and I am very, very happy that the way they are designed and handled here is not how they are going to be designed and handled in Doom Eternal. Because here, they're not very fun. They rely on a strict time limit that makes them much more tedious, much more unsatisfying, much more enjoyable. And I don't like it. They're either boring or they are annoying. Neither of which is desirable. Oh, that's nice. I so rarely get that glory kill. So it just makes me very happy that this is not something that's returning. I haven't played Devil May Cry, but yeah, with that said, it's not very enjoyable. And I can understand what they're trying to do. They're trying to, you know, add another element that helps take away from some of the repetitiveness by adding another kind of gameplay element and also forcing you to work for this stuff a bit more. I don't really appreciate, though, how it is handled, because it is built in such a way that doesn't feel very enjoyable. that I think it couldn't be made enjoyable. But for whatever reason, it's just not. It doesn't work for me. Like, on paper, if you were to describe the idea of room trials to me, I'd be like, okay, that's a little weird for a Doom game, but I mean, it doesn't sound like a bad idea. It sounds like you could make that fun. So I really don't know. It's hard for me to put my finger on exactly why. It just doesn't work. Hello. Whoa, hello. Woo! Dang it. Nope, dang it. And I flipped that up. Is there still guys? Oh, hi! Okay, yeah, okay. Oops. I'm trying to get the direct shot thing. I'm gonna run over here. Oh, hello. You're still alive. Yay, I did it. Yeah. Yet again, another level that kind of ties into the way I was talking about earlier, how the nonlinearness is handled. Also, I know some people don't like the gore nests. Screw them. I love them. Oh my goodness. I do really love the gore nests. I don't know, there's just something so fun and satisfying about just like running up to something, ripping it apart, and then just having hordes of demons spawn. I just find it very, very enjoyable. I mean, I guess you could argue, yeah, they are used a lot. And I do have to say, I really do enjoy that they are becoming more of like a special thing now in Eternal. In case you don't know, the way they've talked about them functioning in Eternal is basically they're going to be hidden and you have to find a key to access them in each level. But there's going to be a special golden door nest. And basically what will end up happening is when you find the key, you'll be able to access this and you'll get a special, really difficult combat encounter. And like you'll get special rewards for having completed it. And I love that idea. That just makes like something I already really liked in this game. My stupid scrolling thing is happening again. Damn it. Stop that. No. Eeh. Hold on. It takes something I really loved in this game already, and it makes it even more special.
We're only temporarily disabling the tower. You need to remove each lens individually. Carefully release the hinges.
Warning. Energy contamination detected.
Destroying the production of Argent energy isn't necessary.
Everyone has talked about this sequence today. This feels like some locality right there. Everybody talked about this level in particular already to death, and for good reason. One thing I love in a later sequence that's kind of like that is he'll say stop, and like the Doom guy will like Doomslayer will like legitimately legitimately halt, and he'll like almost take a second to consider his actions. But it's like very shortly after having mentioned that like this is hell energy that they're harnessing, he just doesn't care and he just continues. And I love that he hesitates. I love that he takes that second to go, okay, maybe I'll hear him out. But it's once he mentions that it's hell energy. It's once he mentions that it's involved with hell. That's what gets him. Like, that's what makes him go, nah. That must be like a very stale cable. I don't know how else to describe that. It's a very stale cable. Very stiff and stale cable.
You must stop. The hell energy is unusable without the filters.
Warning.
What
Energy
you are
contamination
destroying
detected.
is more valuable than you can possibly imagine. It is a perfect and unlimited energy resource.
Well, I mean, I'm sure that's involved too. I'm sure. I'm sure. Like, the great thing about everything the character does in this game is you can read into it so much. I haven't really talked about some of the story elements in this game so much, but like every action that the main character makes is something you can read into on so many different levels, because it's like it's almost like all these moments where he does something are designed in such a way that you can read into it, and they were built to be read into from so many different angles. Like, and I love that, because like you can look at it from the perspective of the main view of the player. You don't care about disassembling these things. You as the player, you want to just get this crap over with and play and fight and shoot and whatever. So it's like it works on that level, where this character is effectively just an embodiment of you. It is just a character who is designed to, in essence, be you and be an avatar for you, in practically representation of what you as a player want. It works from the level of a story perspective, of a narrative perspective, of who this character is, what his personality is, on like telling you who this guy is. And like I said, like from that aspect alone, you can read into it from so many different angles, because like there's the way I mentioned it, or there's the way, and there's also the way of, yeah, he probably really didn't care because he's got more things to worry about than just, hey, I've got to carefully disassemble this stuff. It's like, no, look, this woman is trying to do crap. I just want to get this over with and done with. I don't give a crap. Like, they do such a great job. Like, it's handled, you have to appreciate, because it's handled in very, very subtle ways. It's very, very subtle. It's very, very soft-spoken. How these things are introduced into the game. Very short, but they carry so much weight and meaning for who you are playing as. It's just fantastic storytelling. Oh, and this does kind of tie into, I mentioned it very early as I was playing this, I love the codex entries and stuff, and how they kind of go about answering some of the questions related to the lore and stuff in the world. But they do really leave a lot of stuff open to interpretation. Because there's a lot of characters and names they've mentioned, and some of them sound like, yeah, they could be you, the Doom guy, and if they are, then it's like, hey, this like adds a whole new layer of who this character is, but they don't really directly answer whether or not that is the case. They have so many different paths they could take that, like, I just love it, because it's like they've inherently designed the story in a way that they raise and answer all the important questions, but leave so many more interesting questions unanswered. Like, because when I first got into this game, do you think I gave a crap about the story? No, but now I'm thinking, like, gee, I wonder what they're gonna do with the Green Knights and how the Sentinel homeworld's gonna get incorporated and everything. How is Heaven going to be involved? And are they against the Slayer? Are they for the Slayer? What are the allegiances of, like, are there different demon factions? Is there, like, a governance system for, like, the demon hierarchy? Like, are there overlords in hell? Like, are the Four Horsemen going to be incorporated into, like, the apocalypse and whatnot? Like, there's so many different routes and questions that can be asked based off of the questions that are raised in this game, the questions that have been raised to the marketing and stuff that have been shown off in the internal footage. Like, it is all just fascinating. And the fact that they managed to do this with, like, a franchise like Doom without even, like, just straight up, without really kind of almost doing it in a heavy-handed way that, like, completely is against, like, the core fundamentals of Doom. Doing it in a way that feels very subtle, feels not shoved in your face, and doesn't feel sloppy or heavily-handed. Like, it's all just so very well refined and introduced in a manner that feels my brain just completely died on me again. It feels like it's handled in a manner with such grace and elegance in this game to where you want to care despite the fact that it's a part of a game where you really shouldn't care. Start calling it. Potentially. I think I've had my own various theories about kind of where the story is going. I think definitely Heaven will I can guarantee you right now, Heaven's going to be an adversary. Heaven is not going to be on your side. I can tell you that right now. Like, there's no doubt in my mind. That's definitely going to be the case. Based on what they've been telling us through the marketing and what Hugo and Marty have said, I love those guys, by the way. Based on what they've said, based on the marketing, there's really no way in my mind I can imagine that you, as a character, are going to be fighting with and or alongside Heaven. But even the fact, like, because, like, in the original Doom games, it would have been, like, no question in my mind, yeah, they're probably not going to do something like Heaven, because it's, like, that, like, gets weird and complicated if you had to, like, fight angels and stuff in, like, the original Doom. And it's, like, the original Doom was, like, the demons were so baked into it, was, like, is Heaven even a thing in this universe? It's, like, who cares? But it's, like, now it's, like, it's something that they have the ability to fully realize and fully just, like, dive into in a way that feels interesting and fascinating. And, like I said, so very well realized.
Detected.
It's like, yes, absolutely. I want to see Heaven in the game. That is like, just, I'm all over it. Please give me that. Inject that into my soul right now. And the fact that we're finally getting that, just like, oh. The one thing I would love to see is they've, like, been teasing this Angel character a lot, and a lot of the marketing and stuff like that. I would love to see them, like, incorporate the story of, like, Lucifer and whatnot into the Doom lore and stuff like that. Like, because for those of you who don't know, in the Bible, Lucifer was basically God's, like, chosen, like, angel of the highest order. who basically betrayed God. And as a result, was cast into hell. And the whatnots and the things. Because he tried to overthrow God. And to me, because one of the things they, like, I believe his name is like the Kamakur, which, like, basically what it seems like they're teaching is this guy is like the head of the angels, or which means he's either their interpretation of God, or I'm thinking like he is Lucifer, like he was like, he's like a fallen angel who was like the head of like was the highest of the highs in heaven. And I would love to see this idea of like he's cast into like this other dimension or something, and he ends up like wielding Argent energy to like invade all these other dimensions and to try and, you know, like just turning people into demons and stuff like that. Like, I would love to see how they would incorporate some of those elements into the Doom story if they ever do. Like, it's just it's so. And like that's another thing. Like, I'm kind of dying to see them finally introduce Satan into a Doom game. Because, like, they're like, for a game series that is so focused on hell and God, there is a shockingly heavy lackage of Satan. Yeah, what I almost get the feeling that they're doing is they're going to.
We spent decades
Hell is still
perfecting
going
the
to be the main
science,
thing.
selling it to humanity. We balanced their hell energy with our science, making it usable and safe. We solved an energy crisis the world had no answer for.
Yeah,
it works. You cannot do this.
My theory is they're going to be setting up. So Hell is effectively going to be still the main antagonist of Doom Eternal, but they're going to be setting up Heaven as the secondary, grander threat, right? And then in the third Doom game, we're going to see Heaven itself is going to be the main threat in some capacity. I can't imagine they're going to drop demons entirely. I legitimately do not think that could possibly be the case. But I can absolutely guarantee you that if they do a third Doom game, which I imagine they're probably going to do, which I would love, don't get me wrong, if they do a third Doom game, I can guarantee you Heaven's going to be the next big step that they're going to be pushing towards. Because it just feels like the next logical step, and like kind of based off of like all the information we have so far, it just feels like the next step forward for them. I have like completely missed a ton of stuff. What the heck am I doing? No, we're going back. Cause I gotta get that stuff. I can't imagine that they would just have like only angels and stuff as enemies in the game, because like demons are so core to like the identity of Doom that to have a game where they are sidelined sounds no. I legitimately can't imagine that's a choice they would make. Here's what I'd imagine is going to happen. Maybe in some major way, in the third game, Heaven, God, or whatever is involved with that, is going to effectively end up using the demons to fight against the Slayer, and like the angels are going to be like greater threats. Just kind of think like angels would be kind of more like in the position of like maybe like a Baron or a Cyber Demon or something like that, where it's like they are just like this monolithic threat to the player, right? And so whenever they're introduced, they feel big, they feel special, they feel powerful. And they don't feel like just, hey, this is just another standard enemy type. This is like, no, this is a big, beefy villain. He's gonna throw down. And then like the demons will make up more like they'll still have like those bigger demons, but like they'll be used as more like grunt-like enemies, and they'll kind of be like being used by heaven or something. Oh yeah, I wouldn't have a problem with it. I'm just saying, I legitimately have a hard time believing that's the direction they would go. Right, I was saving them for the next thing for the rocket launcher. That's right. Yeah, I can't imagine. Like, I just have a very hard time believing that's what it would take. Because, like I said, like, demons are so core to the identity, dude, that to have a game that doesn't really feature them as prominent or in a way that is meaningful just seems... Oh, it's better. Oh, hello. It doesn't seem like a route they would take. Like, even if it's in a minor role, I can still imagine them trying to incorporate the demons in some way. Like I said, that's how I probably imagine they're going to do it. It's like, heaven is the main threat, but like, maybe heaven is like using the demons as like grunts or something. Okay, I did get all that. Oh, I screwed that up. I don't ever like using the Berserker, if I'm being honest, because I feel it kind of like the fun to me is like the challenge, it's the fun of like the combat encounters and stuff like that. And to me, just like some of the power-ups, I feel like
If
combat
stopping
encounters
our
too much of a
energy
joke.
production is what you want, then you need only to destroy this last filter, and Argent energy will no longer exist in this solar system. We will be back at square one.
It's like the fights are the fun of this game, like a big part of the fun of this game. So like to not focus on that, to me just like or like to have something that makes those areas a pushover is not something that's
You have
desirable.
no idea what you have just done.
Olivia is still alive. I've detected her life signature at the Argent Tower. She has removed one of the
Also-
accumulators from the tower base. It has a unique energy signature that we can track.
This right here,
Well, that's it then. There's nothing else to be done.
this right here is one of my favorite showcases of this game's visuals. Right here, this sequence right here, and I will show you why. See that? I'm not sure how well this is showing up on screen, but if you'll notice, the sparks and the particle effects directly interact with you as a player in this game, and especially with like there's like an earlier sequence in that elevator where you first walk out and you have the combat shock, and you can actually see like the sparks landing on your gun and fizzling out. I love that. Like that is such a fantastically beautiful attention to detail. I just makes me hug. Yeah. Yeah, so we're about 2 hours into this. I think I'm going to stop right now. I'm going to pick this up about Monday. I will probably, Monday night, I'm coming back to this. We're going to be playing more of it. Maybe we'll get through, I doubt we'll finish it, to be honest. I think we're going to need at least a good 3 streams. Yeah, pretty much. That's a great way to put it. And the thing I love... Yeah. And I do actually want to stop talking about that for a second. And the thing I love is they don't ever make him a villain. He's never the villain in this game. And he even, like, he says that at the end of the game, and it kind of feels like, oh, he's going to be the villain. He's not the villain. Like, he's written in such a way where it's like, you can understand what he's doing. He feels like a fleshed out character who has his own has his own sets of morals, has his own sets of ideology. He's constantly pushing. He has his own goals, and they're not inherently evil goals. They're not inherently negative goals. They're just goals that are fueled by something that is stupid. Effectively, he's trying to play with something that he doesn't fully understand and that he thinks he can control when he really can't. And I love that he's written in such a way that he doesn't ever feel like just a generic bad guy. He is written like a character who feels like he has legitimate motivations and a legitimate personality, and especially like if you read the lore about who he is and stuff like that, it all ties together and makes for a character who could have just been such a cliche throwaway character, but ends up feeling like so much more as a result of it. And a character who really stands out. But yeah, we are going to end up stopping this here. So I hope everybody has a good night, and I will see you all Monday, hopefully. So, adios.